Hi, my name is Shamal Gopal, and I'm going to read you my story called Do I Have a Say? Moving Beyond the Tokenistic by yours truly. Hi, I'm Shamal Gopal. I am a Fiji Indian person who has the deepest respect for First Nations people of Australia. I am a first-generation immigrant, so my story is a little different from the First Nation peoples and European settlers. But what can I say? With confidence is that for a long time, First Nation input in planning has been significantly low. Now it's time for a change because I am not Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. I would like to acknowledge the original stakeholders of this land. Here in the land of of the Indigenous people, acknowledging their land and ownership of it, I acknowledge that we have come late to this land, did not acquire it peacefully or settle it justly. In recognition of and reconciliation for the Aboriginal people, past, present, and emerging. I also want to preface by saying that because I'm not Aboriginal Australian, I don't want to write this story as if I know the hardships they have gone through and are still going through. Still, rather, I want to highlight the struggles of the past and the future and show that Aboriginal people should have a say. The story begins. I am the eagle, and through my keen eye, I see everything. As I spread my wings and fly through the sky, feeling the winds on my beak, I observe the diverse connections that makes a place. I watch the tides ebb and flow and change directions many times, and I always see the connections that are drawn into place, linking them beyond human and balancing it with the environment. As I have flown through the sky, I have seen the development of my country in various stages. I saw the Indigenous people develop, cultivate, and protect the land, skillfully using its resources to their advantage, whilst also making sure that they are not harming anyone. I have seen them use the land to broaden their knowledge and sustainably utilize every component of the land. I have seen the land flourish in the care, leading to a beautiful landscape. But as the winds change, I also witness tyranny and despair. I noticed that the swift motion of change, I saw colonization. Nothing, nothing has escaped my eagle eye. As I flew through the sky in the period of colonization, I saw instability, recklessness in what people who not from this land and what they were doing. I saw the lack of empirical ideas being outlined in planning. I saw the lack of acknowledgement of people who managed this land for thousands of years. I saw ignorance. Early on, the newcomers were here to subdivide and extract resources from this beautiful land. I saw what this meant: deforestation, destruction, and redirection of waterways. I saw the destruction, but I also saw a spark, a connection, a reignition of flame that once was thought to be extinguished. As time moved, a time of change came, with newcomers who brought in diversity and cared about the environment. Sustainability practices becoming the norm in the 90s and the 2000s. They preached on making a better Australia. However, there was one thing that was still lacking. As I perched upon the gum tree, I observed that there was still disconnect between the Indigenous Australians and the settlers. Not only that, but there was also a disconnect between the different settlers also. The connection I saw that could better this country were all yet to be envisioned, and perhaps this is my job. This is your job, and everyone's job. I hope as I flew through the sky, I knew that all along, all would be well once again. The settlers from all the nations and the Indigenous Australians will see eye to eye and develop an Australia that is built for the needs of all and not just for one party. The people, the planet, and you. As I land on this monumental bridge, I see a young girl who I will draw those who will draw those connections and support a new age of planning and collaboration in Australia and the development of this area. 5:30 p.m. on the streets of the Sydney CBD roams a young Darug woman, Kilara, a person who is always there and permanent, is the namesake. Walking to the station after a long day is an environmental planner nervous about her presentation tomorrow on how she can reimagine planning to help build relationships between planners and Indigenous community. She takes in the sights of the city, all aspects, nature, the green walls of UTS, and the picturesque views. As she walks by, she stumbles and sees the new station for the metro, Gadigal. Interesting, she thought to herself. As she examined the structure, she saw a plaque that acknowledged the original custodians of the land. She thought to herself, this is a nice acknowledgement, but I wonder how much of the custodians had a say. She chuckles in dismay, and she remembers the contention that were caused in her office by the name. She remembers how in 2021 the Aboriginal Land Council proposed the name Gadigal Railway Station, and it seemed like most people liked the name. However, some did disapprove. A little time later, when David Elliott, an MP, suggested the name Captain Reginald Saunders after an Indigenous war veteran, names like Pitt Street were also floated. It disturbed her the aversion to wokeness may have hindered. It disturbed her that the aversion to wokeness may have hindered this small acknowledgement of her people. But she also hoped this small change would lead to big things in the future, and that she and everyone like her would have a say. Working in the industry, she knew how tokenistic these sentiments can be. Were they consulted? Were the original planners from the nations present? Did they seek permission? Probably not. But she was willing to change that, and she knew with time she could, and she would. She remembers back to last year with sadness when the referendum saw an overwhelming no. She remembers back to Dean Parkin and what he had said. We have never and never meant to harm you. I want to speak very directly to those Australians who voted no with hardness in your hearts. Please understand, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have never wanted to take anything from you. All we wanted is to join with you. Our Indigenous story, our Indigenous culture, not to take away or diminish what you have said, but to add to it, to strengthen it, to enrich it. But now, she had no solution. She thought maybe she could make one pit stop before she went home. She wanted to see her grandmother. As she hops on the metro and arrives at her grandmother's house, she feels a sense of peace. Her grandmother has always been a source of knowledge for her. She knows she will guide her through the turmoil. Now, she can come up with ideas on how to reimagine the futures of planning by listening to her Nana's stories and learning from the past mistakes. Nana, where are you? She exclaims as she walks through the door. So a soft reply comes from the kitchen. I am here, sweetheart. Kilara hugs her grandmother and exchanges pleasantries and sits down with some tea and biscuits with her Nana. The new station has opened up, Nana, Kilara says. Oh, that's lovely, Nana says, with a mildly shocked expression. She asks whether or not she thought the gesture was tokenistic, and do we really all have a say? Her Nana smirked. It's progress. I have friends from all across Australia, and I remember a time when our voices wasn't even heard. So yes, this is good, but not perfect. But we're on our way. As And as her grandmother did, she started recounting her stories of the past, where development in Australia was less than equal. She recounted the time she heard the story when she was young that back in the 1800s, the settlers had considered an Aboriginal land in the Northern Territory as wasteland, allowing settlers to dispossess the land and ignore the ownership of the Indigenous people. She also recounted back to 1979 when she was a young girl, and the time she heard on the news that the act had been passed called the Environmental Planning Assessment Act, which stated before development and planning could be established, the developer must access the area for Aboriginal artifacts. However, she also heard through her friends that there was very little involvement or even consultation with Aboriginal Australians in Australia. It was rather not acknowledged. Rather bemused, Kilara says, "So tokenistic." "Exactly," her nana exclaims. Kilara thinks to herself that in her presentation tomorrow, one thing is for sure. She needs to reinforce the idea the tokenistic approach is not good enough and there needs to be significant change. Her nana went on to tell the story of the environmental integration of Aboriginal knowledge. In 1992 to 1995, the Wet Tropic Management Authority sought to include the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in management of the topic, but also fell short by not acknowledging the significance of the land and the various groups of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people it would involve. She chuckled to herself. The lack of preparation and acknowledgement of the original custodians led to the downfall of this act. After hearing all the stories from her grandmother, Kilara was hopeful. Kilara had always been resilient and knew that to bring on change, she could learn from these past mistakes that her grandmother highlighted and implemented mistakes that her grandmother highlighted, and she could implement change for the future. She knew she had a long night ahead of her, but she was excited to create a new initiative to enact change and reimagine planning with this. She said goodbye to her grandmother and went home to prepare her presentation for tomorrow. And boy, was she excited to work on her new initiative, ants. She woke up early the next morning, ready to present in the giant boardroom of her office. She started presenting her ideas to reimagine planning to her peers and MPs. After listening to her nana's story, she came up with the acronym and slogan working like ants. A, acknowledgement and involvement. N, notifying the appropriate people. T, tearing down tokenism. S, significant impact. Kilara stated that if we work like ants, focus on the micro view and place our focus on cooperation and develop the connection by focusing on the needs of the community and ecosystem, we'll have a better future. Kilara went on to explain all these components of reimagining planning, starting with A, acknowledgement and involvement. She stated if we acknowledge the Aboriginal people and the knowledge they encompass from the numerous generations of people who have lived here, we will be better able to build areas that are fit for purpose. Kilara brought in examples where acknowledgement of this has bettered sustainability of Australia, such as the Budj-Bin people, where Aboriginal knowledge and created successful agriculture systems to farm eels in the past, or even Deborah Bird Rose urging the public to acknowledge the relationship First Nations people have to country and how this was the way forward for sustainable development. Kilara also stated that utilising Aboriginal environmental management knowledge could reduce the risk of bushfires, as it has in several areas in the Kimberley land, where cool burning is used to reduce the oil load of vegetation to reduce the chances of natural hazards. She went on to expand the N of the acronym, notifying the right people. Kilara highlighted the fact that there are thousands of Indigenous nations across Australia, which means we need to be aware of and contact the appropriate groups. Otherwise, she exclaimed, we will end up in a similar situation as we had before with the Wet Tropic Management Authority, where planners sought to be inclusive but did not quite succeed due to their lack of planning. Thirdly, she brought up the issue of prior planning strategies and stated that they were very tokenistic. First Nations people are very eager to join in the conversation and build Australia to a better future. They don't just need to be tokenistic acknowledgements that we as planners have given them previously, Kilara emphatically stated. While it's nice to have a new station named Gadigal, as there was emphatic support for this, there was very little actual involvement of Indigenous people in the project other than cultural awareness and possibly some jobs. Let the role of Indigenous people be more significant, which leads us to our last point. And lastly, Kiara said in a somber voice, Indigenous people don't want to keep questioning whether they have a say, but rather they want to know that they have significant impact on the place they also call home. They want to join hands with everyone and believe that they are developing Australia for they are developing Australia for the better. That is how we will reimagine planning. The room erupted in applause. Kilara finally felt she got her point across and knew the process of ends would absolutely enact change. As she walks home in the afternoon, she spots in the corner of her eye an eagle perched up on the traffic lights, its regal feathers cascading down on either side in the heart of the Sydney CBD. She looks up at it and makes eye contact. She can almost swear that the eagle gives her a smile, as best the birds can do, as it flies away. Up in the sky, the eagle looks down at the girl as she walks off and says, I fly off into the sky. I know change is here. No more should a group of people question, do I have a say? But now everyone knows we all have a say. That is the best path forward in developing for humans, the environment, different cultures and ethnicities. If you can draw this connection, you can better the lives of all. The end. On the following pages is my references that I used, including my references for the photos. That was Do I Have a Say? Moving Beyond the Tokenistic by Shamal Gopal.